So, growing up, working hard, my father had a fundamental belief of having a good education being the doorway of a better life, because he had to work damn hard, and it was a struggle. And he saw, like many other Asian people, that they wanted their children to have a good education. So my father sacrificed a lot to send us to really good schools. So I felt a lot of pressure, but it was bred into me, you study hard and do well. So I really wanted to do it for my father and my mother, but it was my father the driving force in the family about doing well at school. So I had a work ethic, it was bred into me actually from an early age. You work hard and study hard. So then, I couldn't study what I wanted to study, to be honest with you. My passion was history. But, my mum and dad would say, well, what are you going to do with history? What job are you going to get with history? In fact, Latin was even more of us. I love Latin and history. I'd love to study those at A-level. But no, I wasn't a scientist, so unfortunately I couldn't satisfy their dream of becoming a doctor. So it was, in those days, a bit less, but even today, it's engineer, doctor, or accountant, or lawyer. So those are the esteemed professions. So I guess I was always interested in business, so becoming an accountant was the next big thing. So along that path, I did the relevant A-levels, got into university, went to Manchester, had a great time, and got my degree in economics, and then started my path as an apprentice accountant, which wasn't plain sailing. I did fail my accounting exams a couple of times, because by that time I was distracted other than work in my early 20s, if I'm honest with you. My own fault, but knuckled down, passed the exams, and stayed with one firm for many years. But did some other interesting things as well. So I had a business with the Chinese in my mid-30s. So that was having a midlife crisis. I just had twins. And I decided, well, I wanted to do something a bit different. I had this yearning to set up a business. So I had some friends who were Cypriots, and they set up a business, and they called me over to Cyprus just to see them, so I thought. But what they wanted was me to help them with their business, and they just joined with the Chinese. They were accountants, so it was really odd. And then they wanted me to invest in their business, so I ended up being an investor in their furniture business, and they'd set up a franchise with the Chinese. And one of the brothers had become an international franchise director, and I loved the furniture. It was all really cool. And I decided I was going to open a showroom in Britain, in England, in London actually, although I knew nothing about furniture. I thought, right, I'm going to open this. So I opened up a pretty big furniture showroom. First of all I had to go to China and meet the Chinese and get the franchise. So they allowed me to have this franchise, and the franchise, we were in 25 countries, so it was quite a big franchise. And I was master franchise in the UK, in London, for a few years. But again, that was I could write a book on my experiences working with the Chinese, and at that time it was quite novel and quite stressful, to be honest with you. And in the end, I ended up going back into the city, so that didn't work out, frankly, for various reasons. But I went back. So I'd had these 3 children growing up, and I'd committed myself to their education. You put pressure on yourself to always say the values. So the thing is, I always felt I had to do the very best for my children. I felt I put a lot of pressure on myself, and I guess this is what you take from your parents. Is it a limiting factor? I always felt a lot of pressure to give them the very best education. If my father did it for me, I needed to do it for my children. So I felt I needed to give my children the very best education, and I felt that was in the private sector, rightly or wrongly. So I committed going down that route, and I had 3 children. young children. And I'd started the private route, so I had to go back. When the furniture business didn't work out as I wanted, I went back into the city, because all my career I'd worked as a management consultant. So I ended up going back into the firm that I used to work for. And I thought it was going to be the same experience, and I'd learnt a lot from them, but the culture had changed dramatically. And it was very much a selfish culture, but the values had totally changed. And I did not enjoy any day working for them, but I felt I had to. So basically I prostituted myself to work for them to get the money, but I didn't enjoy it, and the stress was immense every day. I didn't enjoy the projects, I didn't enjoy working with those people. The values were very different, and inevitably there was going to be a consequence of that. Men and women can only put up with so much stress and anxiety. So by this stage I was in my early 40s. I'd been working on a really tough program away from home for several months. Came home for Christmas, went back, started working again. Just before I went back to work, I remember the Saturday before going back, I went to the gym to try and start my fitness regime, and basically I ended up having I thought it was the first, but it wasn't the first. It was the first official heart attack that I had, and which basically turned my life upside down, and that of my family as well. Yeah, so what happened on that day was Saturday, I remember it, I still remember it. I try not to think about it, but did my usual thing. I train on a Saturday. I remember being a really, really cold day. Went to the gym first thing in the morning. I felt a bit uncomfortable. As I remember driving back thinking, I don't really feel great. Have I overdone it? Being just straight after Christmas. So then I get home, and we have a routine when the kids were younger. Even now, we just have a family breakfast on a Saturday. And they just started eating breakfast when I came back home. And I would normally have joined them at the table, but I just said, look, I can't sit with you guys. I'm not feeling well. I just need to. I said, no, I didn't say that. I just said, I just need to rest for a little bit. So I went into the living room and just lay down. And my wife, she came into the living room, saw me, and saw that I wasn't well, and basically assumed straight away the very worst, which set off an argument. She wanted to phone the ambulance straight away, or phone 999 for an ambulance. And she sort of suspected, although I didn't know at the time, she thought I was having a heart attack. She said, what if you're having a heart attack? I said, don't be stupid. I'm training in the gym 3 days a week. Why would I? Because I thought I did everything that you're not supposed to do to get a heart attack. I ate quite well, trained, exercise. I thought that would give me an immunity to such events. However, I remember struggling with her with the phone. So she was phoning the ambulance, phoning 999. I grabbed the phone off her, and we had a little tussle. And I lost that one because I wasn't feeling great. I let her have that one. So she phones 999, and immediately they say it could be that he's having a heart attack. So you've got to give him some tablets, aspirin. So I don't know where she got this high-strength aspirin tablet from, but she gave it to me and I started chewing it, which probably helped to save me until the ambulance came. So I got blue-lighted, and my wife followed me, and with the kids. So the kids were only about 4, 5 at the time. Really young anyway, so and that's when I had the journey to discover that I in fact did have a massive heart attack, which needed. Well, it was funny that even the consultants didn't believe I was having a heart attack. So I sat in the hospital bed on a Saturday and Sunday being told that, nah, don't think so, you're too fit. So even the doctors had this preconception, and that they take a look at you and use stereotypes to make an initial assessment, because the blood test that they did was on the borderline of being positive or negative, so they weren't sure if something else caused it. So even when they did something called an angioplasty, an angiogram first of all, to open me up, and there's local anaesthetics, I could still see and hear what was going on, and the consultant assigned the operation, the procedure, to his junior, thinking it wasn't going to be that involved, and basically said, don't worry about it, you'll be fine, I don't think anything's the matter with you. And within 5 minutes he came back saying, I'm really sorry to tell you this, but I've been proved wrong, you're the 1 in 100 case. That in fact, he goes, I've got some further bad news. He goes, you've already had heart damage before, this isn't your first heart attack. So I'd obviously had a heart attack, I didn't even know I'd had a heart attack. He said, you've got damage to your heart. So I ended up having 5 stents. So those are, I've got blockages all around my major arteries basically, which meant that, which causes the heart attack, but they fixed me up by putting something called like a metal umbrella which opens up the arteries in your heart, and I had 5 of those on that occasion. So that was a real shock. Attack, you think, gosh, that's a really major life-changing experience. And for a while, maybe for a day in hospital, I thought, wow, this is major, isn't it? But then I got really stressed again. But then I guess it all depends on your personality. And my personality was always to fight, and to male thing is to deny your vulnerability. So up until then, I'd always been, we talked about my shield growing up, it was always a defensive shield. So the defensive shield for me was to say, it's okay, you can get over this, it's just a physical thing, they fixed you, so go back to being what you were, work hard and get back to work ASAP, prove everyone wrong, there's nothing wrong with you. So basically I was in a sort of refusal process. I did all the physiotherapy that I was told to do, to get back into fitness, because it was so bad, Sire. It was so bad. I got home, I was so weak, I couldn't even climb a set of stairs. I had to use a banister. So I had to start from scratch to get my fitness back. I couldn't climb a set of 12 steps without pausing for breath. But I got back to fitness in double quick time, because that's what I thought I needed to do. And I needed to prove that to everybody, that I was super fit again. And but it was a facade really, because mentally I hadn't acknowledged what was going on inside. But I presented this image to the world, and I got back to work far too quickly. Within 9 months I went straight back to work, thinking things would be the same as before. But again, unfortunately, I wasn't looked like that, I wasn't viewed like that at work, and that set off a whole train of events which led to my second heart attack, or my next heart attack, 18 months after my first one, after the previous one, while I was at work working for that organization. And that was stress and anxiety as to how I was treated. That was a direct cause of that heart attack. First heart attack, I felt unwell, but not really in a lot of pain. The previous one, this one felt as though, and I knew immediately what had happened. Again, I don't know why it happened in the gym again, but again I was under a lot of stress, so I thought I'd relieve some of that stress by going to the gym. I just finished, it was a Sunday, and I'd just got back into the changing rooms, and as soon as I closed the door on a Sunday in that changing rooms, I felt an immense pain, and it just suddenly came upon me. It was boom, from nothing to boom, and there wasn't time to think, oh, could it be this? No, I just knew that this was a heart attack. You don't get that sort of pain from anything else. There's no other explanation. I knew that. And then I had to make a quick decision, stay in the changing room and wait for help, maybe, and whatever consequences that could be, or try and get help by walking from the changing rooms to reception, which was a good 40 meters away. And so I decided I didn't want to die in the changing room. Basically, I thought, no, this is not where I want to go. So I've got to make an effort to do something to help myself. So I staggered out the changing rooms, and I just couldn't understand. I was staggering, and yet people were passing me by, and no one said, "Are you all right? Do you need any help?" No. I staggered all the way to reception without one person asking how I was or if I needed help. So I managed to stagger to the to reception rather, and I just said, "I'm having a heart attack." And they called the ambulance, and I would lay down, but I didn't get an ambulance for 40 minutes. The best way to describe that pain, I couldn't breathe in without having immense pain, and I couldn't breathe out without having immense pain. It's like some incredible animal, like an elephant, sitting on you. So you daren't move in or out, or you couldn't do anything about it, but you had to just live and hope that you can wait for help, or wait, hoping the pain would go away at some point. And listening to the conversations and the arguing why the ambulance wasn't here. I made some amazing... I suppose I made some changes during that time. I had time to think. 40 minutes is a long time. That was when I realised I needed to make changes. It took that pain to make me realise. If I ever live through this, I said, I'm going to change. I also felt there was something up there, a bigger power that had something in. They had a plan. Obviously, my plan, there was a plan that I didn't really understand or appreciate, but it wasn't obviously to pass and to go at that moment. I had to find what that purpose was. I realised there was a higher power who had a plan for me, because who survives these many heart attacks? There must be a reason. I couldn't understand. I was confused, but I did realise that obviously I needed to make changes because there was a plan, and I needed to understand what that plan was and make some changes. The question was, what was that plan? I didn't know at that time. But I did realise I had to make some fundamental changes and try and understand what was going on here. I realised that I could no longer do the work that I was doing before. That was one change. Obviously, having seen somebody after the heart attack, I had to see a work psychologist actually. He was a very well-known work psychologist, and based in Harley Street, and I remember this because it had a big impact on me. He said, the reason why you had your heart attack, because of the stresses and the problems you faced with your value system being so different to the value system of the organisation you work for. So you were basically becoming ill every time. I couldn't quite fathom out. Every time I used to go to work, we had this automatic entry system with a key card. So you'd have to press that in to get into the gates. But just before I did that, every morning I'd feel a real pit in my stomach. And when I explained that to him, he says, that was your body telling you to stop. You'd had enough. They'd had enough of... It wasn't right for you to be there, and you were fighting yourself. So this is why I think it's so important for people to understand what it is they stand for, what is their value system, and who do you work for, and do they match your value system, And clearly that wasn't the case with me. And and I could see, and the results were there for everyone to see. That's when I realized I really had to make some fundamental changes. So when I was not working as a management consultant, I started having problems with my mind because I was too much time to spare. And that's when I realized I had to do something. So I went to see a doctor. I went to see a doctor because I finally realized I was vulnerable. Up until then, I always pretended to myself, pretended to everyone else. There was no vulnerability there. I just had a couple of heart attacks. Big deal. Get over it. However, that wasn't the case, because it does screw up your mind. Of course it affects your mind. It's a major traumatic event. Trauma affects your mind. But in those days, and maybe to a less extent, but there is an issue with the way we're brought up, especially men, that they're brought up to be strong, to keep emotions to themselves, not admit words like vulnerability. Weak, that's associated with you, weak. And my father, and a cultural issue as well. I mean, in our culture, you don't show your emotions. My father never showed his emotions, ever. Not of vulnerability, not those emotions. It was not the thing to do. Is you are a man and you are bred to do this, to put up with pain, because you're a man. Men are supposed to do this. Get over it. It was those conversations that I've had all my life to myself. But the first important step to my recovery was to admit that I actually am vulnerable. And it's okay to be vulnerable. I think that was a turning point for me. So I went to see the doctor, and he actually tried to help me by explaining my behavior and why I kept feeling angry and frustrated. And it was a sort of a story like my personality type was diagnosed as work psychologists called it AAA type personality, very driven, motivated, competitive. In some ways, they're good in a certain work environment, but in other ways,
great for 3 heart attacks.
But yeah, ready-made for heart attacks and stress, and not very good for other parts of your life.